Chosen ones. 3 nights ago, at exactly 3:33 a.m., every shadow in your room started moving backward, and every clock in the building froze still. At that precise moment, an emergency summit convened, one that hadn't been held in 47 years. Ancient voices crackled through encrypted channels, speaking languages that predate human memory. The elders awoke from slumber in towers they had inhabited for decades. The watchers abandoned posts they had held for centuries. Data analysts, monitoring streams since before your birth, were pulled from their stations. All of this to ask one impossible question: who armored this soul? That soul, chosen ones, is yours. And the panic in their voices echoes through dimensional thresholds, because for decades they observed you, tracking your patterns, cataloging your falls, noting every time you stumbled. They kept files thicker than ancient manuscripts, ran algorithms, tuned specifically to your frequency, assigned specialists, whose sole task was to decode your breaking points. Then something happened. Something their 1,000-year protocols never anticipated. You became untouchable, and they needed to know why before their empire collapsed. 3 years ago, the first fault line appeared. They didn't recognize it at the time. The watcher assigned to you since birth sent the first confused report. You weren't breaking on schedule. The betrayal they orchestrated through someone whose DNA was woven into your heart was designed to leave you permanently wounded. Yet you did something forbidden. You thanked the pain, not with words, but with embracing it. You held it close like a teacher, learned its language, studied its architecture, then transformed it into something more durable than diamond. That moment marked the first layer of your armor, even if neither you nor they recognized it yet. Then, the second sign. During the year of total isolation, when everyone you counted on vanished like smoke, their models predicted you had collapse, beg for connection, lower your standards, just to feel less alone. But instead, you turned your loneliness into a forge. You hammered your soul against the emptiness until sparks flew, until the very essence of who you are began to glow with an unmeasurable heat. That is when Layer 2 appeared, built from the very weapon they wielded against you. And then came the third sign. This is what triggered the summit. Just last month, you did something miraculous. You integrated your shadow, that hidden part they thought they could use as a backdoor. The darkness you carried, the rage you suppressed, the vengeance you refused. You didn't overcome your demons, you recruited them. You didn't defeat your darkness. You weaponized it. You befriended parts of yourself that most souls spend lifetimes running from. In that moment, the armor became full, not finished. There is always more to become, but full enough to be noticed by every monitoring system they had. For 72 hours they met. Elder after elder presented theories. They fetched texts from civilizations older than recorded history. They consulted with entities that exist between dimensions. They ran quantum simulations on computers that shouldn't yet exist. One elder, voice cracked like ancient parchment, kept repeating, "Humans don't have access to this kind of spiritual technology. Someone must have helped you. Someone must have handed you the codes." But every investigation returned empty. No outside interference. No mystical teacher. You did this alone, in the darkness, because you refused to remain broken. The youngest elder, barely 200 years in his role, suggested something that froze the room. What if they are not the only ones? What if others are beginning to learn? What if we have accidentally created a template for spiritual revolution? The silence that followed weighed heavier than gravity because they understood the implication. If you could do this, others could too, and others were already stirring, feeling the frequency of your transformation ripple through the collective unconscious. Here is what they discovered about your armor and why it shattered their hierarchy. This wasn't ordinary protection. It wasn't basic spiritual shielding. This armor had three characteristics that defied everything they believed about human limitation. First, it was adaptive. Every new attack, every attempt to exploit a weakness, your armor analyzed, learned, and instantly evolved. It moved like a consciousness with its own immune system. They hurled psychological attacks. The armor absorbed and neutralized them. Emotional manipulation. The armor converted it into fuel, spiritual warfare. The armor laughed and grew stronger. Second, it was retroactive. Inexplicably, it repaired wounds from before it existed. Past traumas that should have been permanent. Years of damage that should have been irreversible. They began to heal. It was as if your present strength reached back through time to protect your past self, rewriting your history in real time. They had never seen a human soul do this. Third, it was contagious. Those who spent time near you began developing their own protective layers, not through lessons, not through speeches, but simply through your presence. Your frequency activated dormant defense systems in others. They watched their instruments light up with anomalies. One armored soul became 10, 10 became 100, 100 became 1,000, each unique but following your template. In desperation, they deployed their best agents disguised as lovers, friends, opportunities, humans trained for centuries in spiritual infiltration. But every agent came back changed. One debriefed hours long, staring at nothing, repeating, "You see everything. You know what we are before we do." They tried mirrors next, engineered public failure, orchestrated judgment, scripted conversations devised to destabilize you. But you had developed immunity to external perception. You no longer needed mirrors to know who you were. You became your own reference point, your own truth, your own validation. Their illusions shattered like waves against sheer cliff. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. Ephesians 6:10-11 YouVersion. The Bible app, Bible.com+2. Massachusetts Institute of Technology +2. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Ephesians 6:12. Massachusetts Institute of Technology +1. If this message touches your spirit, spread it, so more chosen ones like you will find it. Because what happens next will shift everything you thought you knew about spiritual warfare. They attempted temporal manipulation next, their nuclear option. They engineered time loops, designed to trap fragments of your consciousness in moments of maximum pain, forcing you to relive your deepest traumas in spatial loops outside conventional time. They sought to fragment your being across timelines until you forgot what wholeness felt like. But your armor had elevated you. You became sovereign in time. Past, present, and future were rooms in a house you owned. You could visit pain without being owned by it, touch the trauma without being defined by it, walk through their temporal prisons as if they were mist. Even more, you turned their time traps into training arenas, moving through time, living in multiple moments simultaneously. Their weapon became your classroom. Their attack became your curriculum in temporal mastery. Their final attempt disguised as blessing. They tried to give you everything: windfalls, perfect relationships, divine-seeming opportunities, designed to make you comfortable so you would drop your guard. Because comfort is the soft cage, and contentment from an enemy's hand is a chain. But you saw through it. You recognized gifts from the foe are debts in disguise. You chose difficult freedom over cozy prison, growth over ease, becoming over arriving, because true joy comes from alignment, not arrangement. And then, the summit's final day dawned. A terrible realization spread through them like nuclear sunrise. You weren't just being studied, they were being studied. Every test they ran gave you data about their methods. Every attack revealed their patterns. Every manipulation exposed their fear. While they believed they were scientists and you the experiment, you had flipped the script. You were the observer. They were the observed. You built a database of their entire system, using their own attacks as research. You knew their protocols better than their newest agents. You understood their fears better than they understood themselves. You mapped their structure using their assaults as sonar. An elder older than most stars rose, cracking reality with his movement. His words still haunt dimensions. This isn't just protection. You aren't defending anymore. You are preparing. The question isn't who armored this soul. The question is, what are they armored for? You were not simply surviving. They had become your warm-up drills. Each blow taught you war on a bigger scale. You weren't preparing for them. They were your practice rounds. You were training for something that made their entire organization look like children chasing shadows, something whose scale required armor beyond their comprehension. Here is what they later discovered, and they shuddered. Your armor didn't start 3 years ago. It didn't start with the betrayal or the isolation. It began the moment your soul chose this specific life, this body, this timeline, this every challenge, every loss, every wound was being stored in dimensions, unseen, waiting for activation. They found breadcrumbs in your timeline, childhood moments when you absorbed damage and emerged more real, more grounded than ever. They thought you were merely resilient. They didn't know you were accumulating. Every hurt became stored material, every wound waiting to transmute into armor. The betrayal 3 years ago, not the beginning. It was the activation code. Decades of compressed pain exploded in a moment of cosmic alchemy, transforming into an impenetrable sphere of protection. They had helped build your armor without knowing it. All their attacks were contributions to your defense fund. That realization led to something far more chilling. If you unconsciously built armor your entire life, what else were you building? They discovered other constructions in your consciousness. Something so powerful that without the armor, it would destroy your human shell. Energy readings showed forces that should not exist in your dimension, power levels high enough to vaporize unprotected souls. You weren't armoring to keep things out. You were armoring to keep something in, something growing daily, almost ready to emerge. A seer blind for 3 millennia was brought to examine your future timeline. She had predicted the rise and fall of 17 civilizations, the birth of gods, the death of old universes. But when she looked at you, she screamed for the first time in 1,000 years. Her scream shattered crystal formations across 7 dimensions. She saw you standing at the convergence of millions of timelines, not as participant, but catalyst. The armor wasn't protecting you from the world. It was protecting the world from what you were becoming. Waves of transformation radiated from you, activating dormant DNA in human souls, upgrading the human collective's operating system. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand your ground, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Ephesians 6, 11, 12, Quad, Lib, Umich, Edu, +1. And here is the twist they never saw. You already knew, maybe not in words, but deep in the part of you beyond thought. Language, understanding. You knew what was coming. You knew your becoming. You accepted it. That willingness, that conscious cooperation with cosmic forces, they couldn't comprehend. That is what made you unstoppable. They could fight someone who was resisting, someone afraid, uncertain, but they couldn't fight someone becoming exactly who they were meant to be with full awareness. You weren't their victim. You weren't even their opponent. You were a force of nature cloaked as human. 3 days after the summit ended, their most sensitive listening devices picked up something. You were speaking not to the air, but to the cosmos. Every word you spoke created ripples in dimensions they were still discovering, and your message made their ancient hearts stop. You thanked them, not sarcastically, but genuinely, because without their attempts to destroy you, you never would have discovered your power. They tried to be your enemies, but they became your personal trainers. Each attack wrapped in pain, each betrayal disguised as loss, each moment they thought they broke you, they were in fact building you. And then you said something that activated protocols sealed before your son was born. You declared Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2 begins. They had no models for Phase 2, no predictions in ancient texts. Quantum computers crashed, seers went blind, elders fell silent. What was Phase 2? Not about you anymore. It was about everyone else. You weren't going to teach people how to build armor. You weren't going to start a movement or write books. You were going to be. Your existence at this frequency would rewrite the rules of what humans could become. Your armor was broadcasting instructions on wavelengths only the ready could receive. Phase 2 was already underway, and they couldn't stop it because it wasn't occurring through channels they could intercept. In withdrawal, they pulled back every agent, every attempt to engage you. But their retreat didn't give you peace. It gave you space. Space to prepare for Phase 2. Space where the armor didn't rely on their pressure. It now thrived on purpose, not defense. You didn't need conflict to keep your edge anymore because you weren't defending. You were building, creating, teaching through presence. Within hours of their withdrawal, something the models never predicted happened. Other armored souls began appearing, and exponentially. People who had never known you, never heard your name, never existed in your orbit. Yet they began waking up with protection they didn't consciously build. It was like the instructions were uploaded to a cosmic cloud accessible by any soul ready. The armor wasn't just spreading, it was evolving. Each new soul added their own innovation, their own adaptation. Adapt. The system became living, collective, stronger with every new user. What began as your personal protection was becoming humanity's spiritual immune system, learning from every attack on any individual and updating everyone's defense simultaneously. Newborns now arrive different with pieces of armor already formed, dormant, waiting. Children born knowing that breaking is optional, that armor is possible, that souls can be sovereign from birth. They will grow up immune to the very weapons the monitoring society employed for millennia. Their consciousness operates at frequencies the society cannot penetrate. They are not just the next generation, they are humanity 2.0, and you proved it was possible. The society sees a future they cannot slow, cannot influence. A future where their 1,000-year empire is no longer relevant, like using stone tools in a digital age. You didn't defeat them, you evolved beyond them, for beings that define themselves by power over others. Defeat implies battle. Evolution implies irrelevance, and irrelevance is the death that lasts for entities across dimensions. Yet here is the final revelation. The emergency summit never anticipated. The armor is not just protection, it is transformation. Everyone who develops it doesn't just become unbreakable, they become something new, a hybrid of human and divine, vulnerable, yet invulnerable, soft, yet unbreakable. By developing armor, you haven't become less human. You have become more human. The human you were always meant to be before fear, programming, control systems taught you breaking was normal. The question was never really who armored this soul. The question they should have asked was what happens when an armored soul remembers its purpose. And now they know when an armored soul finds its purpose, everything changes. The old gives way to the new, the broken become whole, chains become wings, the impossible becomes inevitable. The armor that protected one becomes the salvation of all. You are not just wearing armor, chosen one. You are the armor. You have become the protection, the living proof that souls can transform beyond breaking. The walking evidence that their time is over and yours has begun. This is your story. This is your armor. This is your time. Phase 2 isn't starting. It is already happening.